Welcome to Week 6 on Johnny Freak in Fantasy. On today's podcast, I have 15 offensive names, 10 defensive names that could not only do you well for Week 6, but all the way through this fantasy football year. We're going to move into running backs first, and the first running back I'm going to mention is probably a guy who's going to be a lot of number one claims for owners this week, and that's Wendell Smallwood, running back for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's owned in 10% of leagues. However, he is considered the lead back going into Week 6 following the Jay Ajayi sudden ACL tear. He's coming off of 3 consecutive games in which he's gone for 50 yards from scrimmage or more. I do like him a little bit more in PPR leagues. I think Wendell Smallwood is the number one overall running back add for this week, and I think respectfully so. So if you want to burn a waiver claim, top claim, and you need a running back, that's the avenue I'd go. Number 2 is Deontay Foreman from Houston. He's only owned in 20% of leagues. I don't think that he's going to make an immediate impact upon his arrival back in the backfield around Week 7. That's when it's reported that he will make his debut, coming back from that awful Achilles injury. However, I don't expect him to make much noise right out of the gate. But with Lamar Miller hurting physically and his play as well, I do think that there's going to be an opportunity for Deontay Foreman to take more touches away from Miller. I don't think that Alfred Blue, although he had a solid Week 5, I don't think that he's going to earn himself more touches. I think that the Houston Texans understand where they stand with him and Miller. He and Miller both respectfully. And I do think that Deontay Foreman might hopefully gain some ground lead back job there in Houston. So I think he's a great speculative add moving forward. Number 3 is Corey Clement from the Philadelphia Eagles. He's owned in 20% of Yahoo leagues. Listen, if you're picking up Corey Clement in waivers, you're basically taking a chance that Wendell Smallwood either fizzles out or gets injured. I don't like Corey Clement strictly for Week 6. I don't think he's startable in any standard or PPR formats. However, he was named by LaDainian Tomlinson a best fit in the backfield for Philadelphia. And while that is enticing and impressive to say the least, I don't think that Corey Clement will be the better pickup out of that Philadelphia backfield. I think that Wendell Smallwood will be a better add. Moving on, coming in at number 4 is Ronald Jones, somebody I've talked about in the last 2 podcasts. Ronald Jones is only owned in 20% of Yahoo leagues. He's a running back out of Tampa Bay, rookie. I don't think that he's going to run away with the job initially. However, he is going to get opportunity with Jameis Winston at the helm in Week 6. And if Winston can somehow get this running game going as well as the passing game, then I think that Ronald Jones could have potentially a nice opportunity there in Tampa Bay. Now, I'm not saying it's a guarantee that he's going to run away with the job. We saw Peyton Barber fail with the given opportunities the first quarter of the season. Now I think Ronald Jones is going to get his chance. Like I said, far from guarantee. And if you're picking up Ronald Jones this week in waivers or slightly after, there's a really low chance you're going to start him or want to start him for the upcoming week in Week 6. So I don't think that Ronald Jones is a great plug and play, but I think he is a great speculative add on the hunch that he will take that backfield by storm. Number 5 coming in is Nick Chubb, owned in 41% of leagues from the Cleveland Browns, someone I mentioned last week. You're also picking him up this week on the hunch that either Hyde fizzles out or gets injured. He's only had 3 carries the last 2 games. While that's a little bit alarming, keep in mind that Week 4, he made well with those touches with a pair of touchdowns. I do think that you're going to probably stay away if you're a fantasy owner and it's this early on. However, if you are building your team for the playoffs, and if you do have room on your bench, I think that Nick Chubb would be a great add for you on the speculation that he takes over the backfield or that Carlos Hyde, as we've seen very often, gets injured once again. And finally, for running backs, Marlon Mack from Indianapolis, owned in 22% of Yahoo leagues. Listen, I'm not saying go and burn a number 1 claim on Marlon Mack. However, you have to understand that this guy, when healthy, has the potential to own that backfield. I know we've seen Nyheim Hines the last 2 weeks come out big for Indianapolis, but you've got to keep in mind that Andrew Luck and the Colts have thrown 57 more times than the next closest team this season. So I do think that because Andrew Luck has had to throw so much, they're not getting good health out of their starters. T.Y. Hilton's been down. Defense has been banged up. I do think because of that, Andrew Luck has been pushed to throw more. Although, as any good team would, I think the Indianapolis Colts would like to see the run game start to pick up. And I think that's where Marlon Mack can come in. I think he's a good speculative ad going forward. Like I said, not startable this week, week 6, but moving forward, great speculative ad. So let's move over to our wide receivers for week 6. And coming in at the number 1 overall ad for week 6 for wide receivers is, for the second consecutive week, Keke Coutee, 34% owned from Houston. Listen, the guy's got 22 targets and 17 catches in the first 2 career games. He's getting a lot of looks from a lot of different places. Keep in mind, he's got pretty good receivers in front of him, a la DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller, to open up the field for him. He's my number 1 receiver ad if available. Keep in mind that I did list him as the number 1 overall wide receiver for last week, so I doubt he's there, but if he is, don't make the mistake twice, go and get him. Number 2 is Robbie Anderson from the New York Jets, 35% owned. Listen, this guy was dropped in 65% of leagues. I get it. I dropped him in many too. But now is your time to make amends and go pick him back up. Robbie Anderson, last week, he had 3 catches and 2 big touchdowns. Now, I'm not saying expect this type of production week in and week out. However, he does give you a great dart throw, especially in a bind with wide receivers likely on bye this week. I would pick up Robbie Anderson as my second wide receiver. Listen, when this guy's healthy, active, and showing out, he can win weeks for you, especially during bye weeks. Coming in at number 3 is Chester Rogers from the Indianapolis Colts, only owned in 5% of Yahoo leagues. Listen, like I mentioned before, Andrew Luck, he's thrown the most in the NFL, 57 times more than the next quarterback. I think Chester Rogers has developed great chemistry with Andrew Luck over time, especially these last 2 weeks with T.Y. Hilton ailing. I think that he could be a great ad, not only for week 6, especially if T.Y. Hilton sits out, but even when T.Y. Hilton does come back, I still do like Chester Rogers in that role. Like I said, great chemistry with Luck. His rapport continues to build in that offense. He's getting snaps. They're lacking a number 2 target, I should say number 3 target, because Eric Ebron is getting so many targets, he looks like a wide receiver out there. So listen, Chester Rogers, 5% available. If he's in your league, go and pick him up. He could be a great ad for you down the road. My next receiver is Christian Kirk from Arizona, only owned in 9% of leagues. Christian Kirk last week scored from the first play of scrimmage. He remains kind of a developmental project for the Arizona Cardinals. He probably won't overtake Larry Fitzgerald as the number 1 receiver. However, he looks to build strong chemistry with his rookie quarterback, Josh Rosen, and I do think there is room for him to grow in this offense. They're lacking a number 2 target. They're lacking so much right now that they need anything they can get, and I think that even as a rookie, Christian Kirk has the ability to emerge as a solid receiver in that offense. Next is David Moore from Seattle. He's owned in 0% of Yahoo leagues. David Moore last week, in week 5, he had 2 touchdowns. This is a speculation ad at its finest. You're not going to add him in looking for a week 6 starter at wide receiver or flex. However, I do think that given the lack of targets, the lack of Doug Baldwin's health in Seattle, the only thing they have going in the passing game right now is Tyler Lockett. So I do think that until Doug Baldwin gets healthy, or at least until he shows a little bit more, I think David Moore is worth an ad on your team. I think that he has the potential to be a nice addition. Could be a wide receiver 3, I'd say. So I do like David Moore from Seattle. My next wide receiver is Traquan Smith, only owned in 2% of Yahoo leagues. Last week he went 3 catches, 100 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Ted Ginn's hurting going into the bye, and I think Traquan Smith is emerging. I think he's a great speculative ad for someone who is trying to maybe get the upper hand on the future. I think that given a week or 2 coming out of the bye, if you have the roster space and the ability to do so, I think he's a great ad and a great stash, because I think that Ted Ginn is not going to gain his full health back regardless. He's getting older now. They're looking for some way to replace him, some complement for Michael Thomas, and it looks like Traquan Smith, the rookie, could be just that. And finally, for last but not least, is Martavis Bryant from the Oakland Raiders, only owned in 4% of leagues. look, you're not adding him to start anytime soon. He's a very risky gamble. He barely was even in a uniform coming into the year. But look, over the last few weeks, he's making deep plays that we knew he could. He's catching over 15 yards per catch. It's a deep speculation ad. Like I said, you're not going to start him. But I do think given the lack of production at wide receiver and lack of consistency from Amari Cooper and Derek Carr, we could see Martavis Bryant earn more looks and potentially bring in flex value at receiver position for Oakland. Next, I want to talk about 2 tight ends. The first being Cameron Brate, owned in 33% of Yahoo leagues. If you're in a bind, you have someone injured, maybe someone on bye, I would definitely not hesitate and go pick up Cameron Brate. We've seen the kind of chemistry he can develop with Jameis Winston they have developed before. I do think that will translate. Week 4, before the bye, he had a touchdown, so there is promise there. And the second tight end I like this week, if you're in a bind, is Jeff Swaim, only owned in 9% of leagues from Dallas. Look, I like him more than wide receivers Michael Gallup and Allen Hurns in that offense. I do think that Jeff Swaim, he is no Jason Witten, don't get me wrong. However, I do think that he can provide probably 8 to 10 fantasy points in a bind, so I do think that's a solid, substantial amount for a waiver tight end. And now I'm going to shift things to the defensive side of the ball with my IDP pickups for the week. I'll give you 5 safeties and 5 linebackers who I think can not only make good on week 6, but further down the road for your defense. My first safety is Marcus May. Marcus May broke a record for the longest career interception without scoring. And we saw Doug Middleton rack up points while Marcus May was out earlier in the year, and Marcus May continues to come in there his first 2 weeks and get it done, being a highly effective safety. So I do think that is a great spot for points, for fantasy points, and I do think Marcus May, being the playmaker he is a great add for you this week. Number 2 for safeties is Tedrick Thompson. He's a safety for the Seattle Seahawks, playing for the injured Earl Thomas. He's owned in 0% of leagues. I do like Tedrick Thompson. Coach Pete Carroll spoke highly of him, said he needed to finish his tackles a little bit more, but Thompson did solid in relief of Earl Thomas. He had 7 tackles last week, and I do think playing next to Bradley McDougall will put him in great spots for tackles moving forward. Next is the rookie Justin Reed from Houston, only owned in 2% of leagues. Over the last 2 games, he's combined for over 10 tackles. I think his playing time is increasing more and more. I do like him to make tackles in the middle of the field. I don't think they're getting really good linebacker play, the linebacker play that they thought they would. And if teams continue to throw on them, I think that Justin Reed is a great add. Next is his brother, actually, Eric Reed, who could be a star in the making. Eric Reed only had 3 solo tackles last week. He's only owned in 2% of leagues. This isn't somebody you have to pick up, and I'm telling you to start. However, I think it's a great speculative add. If you have room on your bench for a defensive player, I think Eric Reed can be a difference maker. He gets Washington this week. We saw what Alex Smith did versus New Orleans. And I do think that Eric Reed has a big game, and I think that he's going to be on your radars coming up. And last, owned in 4% of Yahoo leagues, is Minkah Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick showed he can play well when Rashad Jones was out earlier this year. And while Jones looks banged up himself, Minkah has been getting starts as a rookie. They want to see what they have in the rookie product out of Alabama. I really like his versatility. He's a ball hawk. He's a playmaker. I really think Minkah Fitzpatrick, not necessarily a player you have to add this week, but somebody to definitely keep an eye on at that position. And finally, we're going to shift over to our linebackers. I'm going to start off with my number 1 linebacker ad for this week is Jerome Baker, the rookie out of Miami. He's only in 1% of leagues still. Somehow, I don't understand this. Over the last 3 games, he's had 26 tackles. Last game versus Cincinnati was kind of a homecoming for him as he went to Ohio State in college. He finished with his first 2 career sacks. And I recommended him last week, and I said to go ahead and pick him up, and he's a safe play. We had 7 tackles and 2 sacks. So he was a great add, and I do think moving forward he will be a great add as well. Next is linebacker Jayon Brown, owned in 3% of leagues for the Tennessee Titans. This is another guy I told you to go pick up last week while Wesley Woodyard was out. He had, over the last 3 games, 27 tackles. Last week, while I recommended him, he had 10 total tackles and a sack. And while I do think that there's a chance that Wesley Woodyard could get back, Wesley Woodyard, like I said last week, has been playing while he has been making tackles as well. So while I do think that Wesley Woodyard's return would impact him in the negative aspect, I do think both are startable for the time being. Next is the veteran Mark Barron from the LA Rams, owned in 12% of Yahoo leagues. He made his debut last week in Week 5. He's been injured all year. Looks like Achilles injury. He had surgery, 2 surgeries this offseason, but he looks to finally kind of regain his form. He wasn't 100% healthy, he admitted after the game. However, he did end with 9 tackles. He's a big-time tackler, and I think down the stretch, he could be a steal for you in your IDP league. So go pick up Mark Barron where available. Next, we have linebacker Leighton Vander Esch, the rookie out of Dallas. He's only owned in 7% of Yahoo leagues. I mentioned him last week to go pick him up. He ended with 14 tackles versus Houston. I do think it's kind of a changing of the guard in this situation, although with all due respect to Sean Lee, I do think that Leighton Vander Esch, at the time being, is the better defensive start, not only in fantasy, but for the Dallas Cowboys as well. I really like the rookie, and I think that as long as Dallas is getting beat on and they're getting run on, I think Leighton Vander Esch, as well as Jaylen Brown, are both really good ads, especially while Sean Lee is out. And finally, for my linebackers, the last linebacker, I mentioned him last week. He didn't do so hard. He only ended with 4 tackles. He blew a coverage on a big, long touchdown, and that was Markel Lee from the Oakland Raiders. I am sticking with Markel Lee for this week to see what happens because although he only had 7 tackles after a nice 10-tackle effort in Week 4, his snaps are continuously rising. He is the better pass coverage linebacker. They do prefer him over 35-year-old Derek Johnson. So I do think that as his snaps tend to increase and he gets more experience, he will become the linebacker that we all think he will be. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for listening tonight to Johnny Freak in Fantasy. We will see you around this time for Week 7. Enjoy your night and good luck this week.